Next on stage, we have 3 universities. We'll start with the Vlerik, with öykü Isik. She's Professor of Information System Management, and she will talk about privacy issues when there is an elephant in the room.
Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. And indeed, since morning, we've been listening to great stories and what data can do. Yet, as fittingly, and as also here in this room, there's an elephant in the room referring to the privacy issues, which is actually very important and critical, as I'm sure all of you recognize, but yet not so frequently discussed, even today, I think, in presentations. So I started doing research on privacy about 1.5, 2 years ago. And if you ask me what I learned, the first thing I learned is the fact that, as one of the previous speakers mentioned, that there's a consumer revolution going on, and it's really not enough to really say, well, we're not going to share your data with third parties, your data is safe with us. So this is really not the case anymore, it's not enough. But what I actually realized that organizations are not necessarily paying the level of attention that they should normally pay. So I decided that I should start focusing first. So I first started with looking into financial services organizations. And I started interviewing experts, about 20 experts who are working with big data in their daily lives, but also dealing with consumer data as well. And I asked them, what do you think about this? First question I, of course, posed, what kind of opportunities do you see with big data? Thank you. Great. So the first initial findings about this research is written in a white paper that I think you can all find, Data-Driven Financial Services, State of the Art. So I asked the opportunities that they think big data may bring to their businesses, and as you see, these are all usual suspects, right? Oh, collaboration, better consumer experience, reaching out to our consumers, and even more innovation with data. And when I ask, about challenges, of course, I was very interested in hearing their perspective about privacy and ethics. And what was very interesting to me was the fact that this issue, privacy, was always brought up as a problem to be tackled. So it was really the case that these organizations were focusing on scandals, as if they were waiting for their own scandal to happen so that they can finally start paying more attention to privacy issues. And when I confronted them about this, the fact that why privacy is not a bigger discussion in your organization, they said things very similar to what our friend Mark Zuckerberg already said a couple of years ago, is that people have really gotten comfortable sharing. They don't really care. There's no such thing as privacy anymore. It's not a social norm as we used to know it today. Then I started thinking, is this really the case? That's why I kind of delved into the literature. That's what I do, right? And I actually figured out that privacy, these discussions around privacy is not longer or not older than 10 years old. And you find a lot of research from a consumer behavior perspective, from marketing perspective, and from information systems perspective. So that's what I want to share with you. What do we really know about privacy? And these are the core elements that are very frequently discussed and empirically tested and evaluated. And that if you ask someone to share their personal data with you, the first thing they will be thinking of is their privacy concern. How concerned are they that you will misuse their data? So the privacy concern is a very important concept in all this discussion. And there are other things that impact one's privacy concerns, such as these things you see here in the list. So transparency, the trust as a consumer I have to the organization, how strong their privacy policies are. Do they give me control over my own data, or how the reputation of the company is? But of course, there are other social norms, what my friends and family think about this company. How about the emotions, the particular way that I'm feeling that day that my data is asked for? So these are all core elements that are proven to impact a consumer's privacy concern. A very interesting notion that brings all these together is a theory called the privacy calculus, So all inherently, we all make that calculus in our minds and we see what are the benefits of me sharing my personal information with this organization and what are the risks, costs associated with it. And all the core elements that I listed before can be grouped mostly under either as a benefit, such as trust and privacy that positively influence my privacy concern, versus my past privacy invasion experience, for example, that negatively influence my privacy concerns. But how about transparency of data? Or how about perceived ability to control information? Where would you put these two concepts? Do you think they positively influence one's decision to share their personal data or negatively influence? You would mostly say positively influence, and that is indeed the case, but not always. This is yet another very interesting concept that is called privacy personalization paradox. This very basically says that sometimes people say one thing, but do the opposite. That you may ask me if I'm willing to share my data with you, and I might say yes, but when you actually ask for it, I won't be sharing it with you. And people figured out through several empirical tests that the more transparency they demand, some people, the more transparency they demand, the less they will be actually sharing with you. So one learning point from this research is that maybe it's better for organizations to accept the fact that there are groups of people they may never reach. They may never be able to get reliable data from. That is why it's suggested that maybe it's a better idea for organizations to focus on consumers who are less privacy sensitive. And how would you know that? Maybe assessing their privacy sensitivity as a segmentation method might be a good idea. When I ask my contacts about this, I realize that not many organizations think of doing this. Maybe you think there's not really great value in doing so, but I definitely am convinced that it's an interesting concept to pursue further because it has been done before in the beginning of the 90s. Alan Weston was the leading privacy researcher at that time, and he conducted huge surveys, thousands and thousands of people, and he figured out that you can actually group these people under 3 groups. The privacy fundamentalists, who are very distrustful, the pragmatics, who are very keen on that calculus, and finally, the unconcerned, who really are not very interested, or they are privacy apathic. They don't really care about these issues. So I think it's a very interesting concept to think these terms and how they apply to your consumer base. So what do we really know? We know that there are elements that you can objectify, such as the trust, reputation, things that you can measure, but there are also things that you cannot measure that are very subjective and very context dependent when it comes to one's decision about sharing their personal data. I think what is important for you to know that there's great malleability or your ability to influence in this situation. This infographic is from a very recent survey where it shows that 67% of consumers say they would like to feel more private, they would like extra layer of privacy on their digital data, yet you see only fractions of them are actually using privacy enhancing technologies. So you as organizations have a great opportunity here. Something you can immediately start doing is teaching them. So do teach your customers about what they and they cannot do about privacy. A very good example is Channel 4 from UK. I suggest you check their website out. They know nobody reads privacy policies. So they hired a comedian and created this 3-minute video that talks about privacy policies of Channel 4. And also do deliver value, just like Pandora, the online radio station. They tell you exactly what kind of data they want from you and how that data will improve the service they are providing to you. And finally, do give consumers control over their data, just like this meta-distributed heart rate monitor. This piece of device does collect your or checks your heart health, and all the data that is collecting is under 100% control of the patient himself. So he has the right to decide what piece of information goes to the doctor, to other healthcare providers, and other, let's say, members of the family. So there's 100% control over the data streams with this device. And for a more future-oriented investment is that I suggest you start thinking about privacy by design. I wonder how many of you have heard this concept before. It's actually not a lot. It's actually not a new concept. It has been developed second half of 90s by a privacy commissioner of Ontario, Canada. So it's a more big thing over there, and the applications are more, there are more examples over Canada on how this could be really applied in real life. But it's basically an approach to protecting privacy by embedding it into the design, not only the design of the technologies, but also in the design of business processes. And it really works with these 7 principles. It says that privacy should be proactive and not reactive. So it suggests stop the firefighting mode and stop paying attention to privacy when you actually have a problem, but do deal with it in a very proactive manner. It also suggests that privacy should be the default setting. So by default, privacy, unlike Facebook, privacy should be the #1 setting, highest privacy settings should be the default arrangements. And of course, it should be embedded into the design such that positive sum will be achieved. That is, you don't have to sacrifice something in order to receive privacy. It could be a win-win situation. And of course, it should be user-centric, and it should be open, that users should have the full visibility and transparency and controllability of the data that they are sharing. And finally, I would like to suggest to know your customers, which is the most important thing, because working on approaches that build trust has been empirically shown to increase people's willingness to share data. And do focus on prevention, because it's easier and more cost-effective than rather than after the fact working on privacy. This way you will be asking permission and you won't have to ask for forgiveness afterwards. And finally, do get smart and lead by privacy by design, not with privacy by disaster. Thank you.